how they can work together or work through their life to go and get that next great thing. So because I've been doing that for a coon's age, I have had lots of experiences, and I'm privileged to share those with you today. So we're going to talk about a couple of my stories, a couple of your stories, and again, ask lots of questions. I will tell you that last week, when so many people said, yes, I am ready to start a business. Yes, I want to move forward. Yes, I am going to be this new person. We were all so excited with that. And when you commit to saying, yes, I'm going to have an incredible business. Yes, I'm going to be the next person that I'm going to be. I'm going to change the world with my gizmo. There is fear that goes with that. And the fear is that somebody could take it away from you. We all have seen this in the movies where, the bad guy swoops in and takes your idea and makes $1 billion on it. And I think that happens less often than we would be led to believe, but it is still very important to protect yourself. The first thing that I think every business owner should have is a bookkeeper and an accountant. They may be the same person, they usually are not, but you need to have somebody who will help you understand the numbers and somebody who understands tax law and all of those things. As I said in the notebook, my father-in-law said, a good accountant will save you more money than they ever will cost you. And that is absolutely true. Every time I've wanted to make a decision in my business, I've called my accountant and said, what does this look like? And he always knows some law or some technicality that I have to think about. And the exact same thing is true of my business lawyer. The business lawyer has saved me a ton of money and a ton of grief. But I want you, as you're starting your businesses, to really consider making sure that you're charging enough that you can pay for a good accountant and a good lawyer. They're going to help you a ton. When you're working on your business, you want to make sure that you have good systems, and you want to make sure that your cost covers all of those systems. And that's kind of what we'll talk about a little bit today. So we're going to start with Tana from TLC Lingerie. She's going to tell us her story. Tell us about this business that you purchased, and give us some insights on, accounting and legal things that you have gone through. Have you ever signed a contract that were like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this? Give us a little talk about your story, Tana.
Good morning, everyone. Well, my story is that I come from an accounting background. So what I'm doing now is totally different than anything I have ever done. Forensic accounting was my specialty. I specialized in finding fraud and just being able to all facets of accounting. So coming into the business, it was a business of opportunity. TLC Lingerie, for a lot of people, that it's been in business for a long time. The former owners of it were my business partner's mother-in-law and her friend. And they had tried for over a year to sell the business unsuccessfully. And they were just going to retire and close it. And it was heartbreaking because we knew what a community, what it provided to our communities. And so Lisa approached me while I was working for, as a controller for Google. And she approached me about going into business, and we had wanted to. We've been friends since 8th grade, in each other's lives for decades. We knew we wanted to do something together, something creative. And so it was just right time, right place. And so when we knew they were going to close it, we stepped in because we did not want it to close. And in hindsight, that probably we jumped in with both feet and very blindly. But Lisa and her husband were photographers. They had a successful photography studio for 35 years. And so for us, the talents that we both had to bring into the business served us well in what we were doing. We definitely wanted to make it more of a place that people wanted to shop, not had to shop. Because when you carry over 50,000 bras in items in stock, from very, very small to very, very large, you have over 1 million items of inventory very, very quickly. So it was one of those things that uh, I'm glad we jumped in the way we did, because if I would have knew all the numbers going in, um, I probably would have been too scared to do it. But I had faith, and um, our families were very supportive. So that was the start of our journey. And
And I'm going to stop you just for a moment there because you touched on something that I want to hit on. And that is, you didn't know all the numbers going in, which we so often do as women. We trust what's happening, trust what's being told, don't always get the whole story. Was there a moment when you started to sign papers and you're like, oh, I don't know? Or did you just go for it?
well, I did. I, of course, with my background, I wanted financials. I wanted to see a 10-year history. But what the numbers were telling me was decline, decline, decline. And but I knew that the strengths that we had, that we could change this around. And I had faith. And I, even though the numbers were telling me no, as I signed the papers, I will tell you, I signed the papers and then I told my husband. So, um, which probably wasn't the wisest move, but I just said, by the way, we own a business now, so just letting you know.
Oh my
So,
God. So that brings me to the next question. First off, you guys will hear this on another call, but I'll say it now. I think that you can build a business with a spouse or without a spouse, but not against a spouse. You really want to have them on board, generally,
yeah.
is a good idea. Um, so that was a great way to handle that. But tell me about forming the partnership. As you guys saw in the notes, the best
Mhm.
decision I ever made was made by my daughter. And she's the one who said, we need a ironclad partnership agreement. And boy, howdy, did we. I didn't believe it. I'm like, oh, I'm a team builder. We're a fabulous family. Why would we need that?
Yeah.
We
That
needed. So tell us about your partnership agreement. How did that feel?
Okay, so Lisa, like I said, Lisa and I have been friends since 8th grade. We've been in and out of each other's lives. We both worked for each other. So I've worked at the photography studio. She's worked at different places with me. But our friendship was a priority. And in order for it to stay a friendship, we had to have a good attorney. And so that was our first investment, was into our attorney, who then created a document of what happens to form our partnership, how is it divided up, why is it divided up that way, and what happens if things don't work out. And the thing is that in a partnership, the easiest thing is, okay, we're going to dissolve it and be done. But if you make it a little bit harder to dissolve, you're a lot more apt to work at it. And so what we did is we put a very small value on a buyout. So if somebody wants out of our agreement, they're not going to get a big payout. They're going to walk away with basically, thank you for having served and played. And as the time goes on, we feel that that's going to be a very good solution, because we're in year 3 now, and those first 2 years were tough ones. But what we did, in addition to our whole process of getting legal documentation and everything, is we hired a life coach. And we did that because we knew that we would need somebody who would basically be able to referee, as we maneuvered, who is handling what and what is your duties, and how do I step back from that. And then the hardest thing for me was hiring an accountant. I did hire an in-house accountant that actually works with our CPA. And of course, with my background, I was like, oh, I can handle this. I can handle this. Well, what I found it was, I have about 18 hats I have to handle. So those ones that I need very stringent detail accounted for, those are the ones that I entrusted to people and made my circle with Lisa a little bit more. We surrounded ourselves with good, trusting people. And with investing in them and them equally investing in us has helped us really turn the business around and be successful. Our business has grown. Before COVID, our business was on a path to continue growing very rapidly because we turned it into more of a boutique and a place people wanted to come. And so having a shared vision, and with Lisa and her photography eye, design is her specialty. So I had to take a huge step back and let her be in charge of the design because, quite truthfully, of the two of us, she's much better at it. So, and so you really got to look at your strengths and weaknesses. I highly found going in with a partner very helpful because we both had things in life that came up that we had to rely on each other to step in at times that we weren't 100% available. And also venting, being able to vent about the things that are going on that we can understand each other. It's very, very helpful to have somebody who's in the same shoes you are and be able to say, you know, I had a really crappy day today and this is what happened, or I had a life-changing moment today. And in the business we're in, I can tell you that sometimes somebody will walk in with their story and it changes my life. It changes my employee's life. And I will share those moments because that's why we're doing what we're doing. And so it's important to have somebody that you trust enough, whether it's your business partner or not, that you really can vent without getting direction.
So
And
that is such a beautiful point, how important it is to surround yourself with people, the right people. I'm really thrilled that you talked about that. We're going to continue to hear from you as we go through this. I know you have a lot more to say, but I want everybody to just stop for a moment and think about your board of directors and the people that you're surrounding yourself with. In the workbook, I made just a little bit of a note about, you know, who you need on your board of directors. And I go into that in my book, What's Next. There's a whole chapter called Boo, and it's about the scariness of starting a business. And when you're surrounding yourself with a board of directors, they may or may not know that they are on your board of directors, but you need to have people who understand money, and you need to have people who you can call when you have that life-changing moment that Tana is talking about and know that they get it. You also, on your board of directors, need to have a naysayer. It is very important on my board that I have people who understand my energy, but also can gently remind me that how it works in my head is not always how it works in the world. And they have to be gentle about that because I'm always sure that I'm right, but sometimes I'm not. So think really hard about the people that you are bringing onto your board of directors. Again, you need that lawyer, you need that accountant, you need a good commercial real estate person if you're going to be getting into a lease situation. You need people who understand contracts. As a consultant, I sign contracts for tens of thousands of dollars for one day's work. And I have to make sure that, you know, all I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So the board of directors that you surround yourself with is hugely important. So I'm going to ask Amanda and Jill to pop on now. Tell us what you do for the world and why you're here this morning, and just give us some tips and some feedback on all these things, these wonderful things Tana said.
So I'm Jill Deirdrum. I am an attorney at Axelon Law. I am in the firm's Missoula office. I have been with this firm since I graduated law school 15 years ago. I came here because I had a baby, my first child in my last year of law school, and I was looking for a place where I could practice that would allow some flexibility to have a life. And as we all in the legal field know, there is really no such thing as a part-time lawyer. I think the world has changed a lot since COVID and since 15 years ago, but I have seen a huge change in the last year with the way that the world views work-life balance. And, having a child walk into the screen on a Zoom is something that is acceptable now. That is something that would have been mortifying and looked down upon. Even taking a call from home would have been really uncomfortable 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. But anyway, I mean, just from the women's perspective, I came to this firm, I was the only woman for the first at least probably 8 years, and now we are more women owned than men. And we have Amanda, our female associate. And what I do, we are primarily litigation. We do also have some folks who do business formation, contracts, those kinds of things. That's not really my specialty. I usually see it on the back end when somebody is either being sued for one thing or the other. It might be a product liability issue. We do some personal injury defense, truck accidents, construction accidents, those kinds of things. But we also do partnership and corporation litigation. We're involved in some of that right now, ranches that split up, other kinds of businesses that split up. And then also we see contract claims for any variety of things, businesses or insurance companies who are being sued over interpretation of a contract, who breached it and how and why, and then what are the damages. So from my perspective, I mean, there's lots of different things. It's hard to really put in a nutshell what I would say about contracting, depending on kind of the subject matter of the contract. But I would add that to the list of people you need an insurance agent who can help you insure yourself against as much risk as you can. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of insurance, and you want to make sure you have all the right kinds in place and that you understand the interplay between the two, because sometimes you'll get a claim. For example, I had a case this past year where we had a company being sued by some former employees. The employees made a work comp claim. Work comp fought it on grounds that it was not a physical injury. And so the work comp was denied, but when there wasn't a physical injury, that meant then they could sue the company. They could get around that exclusivity that employers are afforded under the Work Comp Act. So then they had a lawsuit on their hands, and they had to try to figure out how to cover it under one of their other policies. So those are the kinds of things I would say look out for on insurance. And then two other big red flags and areas I want to call your attention to in contracting. Sorry,
Jill,
go ahead.
Can I just say about insurance? You're right. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't mention that. But it really does not matter what kind of business you are. If you're working in your home, if you're working on the internet, you need insurance. Consultants need insurance. And often people don't think this, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. Even if you, on the work comp subject, I kind of got a kick out of one of the little pieces of advice on the Montana State Fund website. Now with COVID, there was a kind of a Q&A about what's covered and what's not. And one of the examples was, I have an employee working from home. They're on a work call. They're walking around their kitchen and they trip over their dog. Is that a work comp claim? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. So things that you would be shocked at, especially in this environment where people are working from home, you might be on the hook for that. And so you want to make sure you are covered because you don't want to be in that spot where you are not insured. It's a big risk.
Thanks.
The other two areas I wanted to mention to think about in your contracting are indemnification clauses. Those are the little pieces that say, if you do something, we're going to transfer that risk back to you. And so you want to look carefully at those, have your attorney look carefully at those, and make sure that those indemnification clauses are fair and they run both ways. So that's something to look out for, because you certainly don't want to be on the hook for, if you hire a subcontractor or you hire somebody to do something for your business and they insure somebody, or they end up in some kind of commercial dispute, you could end up on the hook for that as well if there's an indemnification clause that puts that burden back on you. So you want to look at those really carefully. And the other piece that you always want to look at is whether or not the contract has an arbitration clause, which would require you to submit any kind of dispute to an arbitration. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can be an okay thing, because sometimes arbitration is faster and less expensive than being in court, but it requires you to pay a bunch of money up front to pay an arbitrator. And so those are things you just really want to think hard about and make sure you're getting some good advice about before you jump into contracts.
Sorry, my gosh, Jill, you are so helpful on these things. Talk to us just for a moment, if you can, about partnerships, because a lot of people form partnerships with their family, or somehow have investors that come in to help them get started. Can you address that a little bit for us?
Sure. You mean just kind of the different types of partnerships there might be, and
right, and why you need partnership agreements, because
sure.
A lot of times a partnership is, oh my gosh, let's go into business, and boom, they're in business, not thinking about the ramifications.
Right, and that's true. And there's actually a statutory scheme that addresses partnerships. And so you may, if you don't have a formal agreement and you get into a dispute with your quote unquote partner, you may end up being subject to the statutes that will say, no, in fact, you are a partnership. And since you didn't make an agreement, we're going to apply the default rules under the statute. Those are going to apply to you. And so you don't have a say in that. So get an agreement, spell it out. As Tana said, you spell out the exit strategy, what happens when somebody wants to leave. And there's different ways you can do it. There's limited liability companies, there's S corporations, there's partnerships, lots of different ways to set it up, and your attorney and your accountant should talk about that and figure out how the taxes flow through to you individually. But the other reason you want to do that, and I'm sure you all know this, you're all business people, but the other reason you want to do that is if you don't have an entity, then you open yourself up for personal liability. So if you do get sued and you have a formal entity, the partnership or the LLC, that should be the entity on the hook for whatever the liability is. If you don't, people can come after you individually. And so your house and your car and your personal assets and your bank accounts, those can be subject to collection if you get a judgment against you. So it's really important to have that formal entity and to make sure that you follow you recognize the formalness of the process. You file your annual reports, you have your meetings, you don't intermingle personal and business funds. Those are the kinds of things that when we see you on the back end, when you've been sued, we go, please let there be a formal entity, and please let them have not intermingled things, because we never want you to have your personal assets subject to any kind of risk.
Tell us a little bit more about that, because a lot of people this is their very first time thinking about business. So tell us about not intermingling funds. Do you mean two different bank accounts? Tell us about that.
Yep. your personal bank account should not be the account through which your business runs. So the business ABC company ought to have its own bank account where the money goes in and out. And if you're going to pay yourself, you pay yourself from, you work it out with your accountant, whether you pay yourself a salary and take out taxes, or if you just take draws and give yourself a K-1. However you work that out with your accountant doesn't really matter for reliability purposes, but you want to recognize the formalness of the entity. And so separate account, you want, when you're out there doing business and presenting yourself to the world, you don't want to do it as Jill Jerdrum. You want to do it as Axelon Law, because when somebody thinks I wronged them, I want them to understand it is in my capacity as an attorney with Axelon Law, not in my capacity as an individual, because I don't want my own personal assets at risk for anything.
Excellent. Jill, you were giving us so much info. And Amanda, I appreciate all the head shaking that you're doing.
Right. I'm here for support. No, I keep thinking when I joined Axelon officially as an attorney, I worked for Axelon before I went to law school, and then I'd come back for the summers as well. The first case I jumped in on was a minority shareholder lawsuit alleging oppression. It's a statutory Montana S Corp, so a small corporation. And there, one of the biggest issues is a majority shareholder wasn't necessarily following. He was counting things as a business expense that couldn't be counted as a business expense. And then you have this large lawsuit, worst case scenario, a forensic accounting, which is incredibly expensive. So going back to, yes, follow the rules. And also Tana's point about having a partnership agreement and communicate. Make sure they understand. Make sure you're all on the same page as best as possible. There's no guarantees that you won't have an issue down the line. But the better the communication, the more likely you are to avoid a worst case scenario.
Excellent. I appreciate that point. I'm going to ask you a question, and I don't know that you're prepared to talk about this, but maybe you are. Several people who are on these calls with us have done things like direct sales businesses. They've joined a direct sales company, and there's a lot of things that can happen there, like commingling of funds. But do you have any tips for that crowd?
When you say direct sales, do you mean like
Mary Kay or
multi-level marketing?
Yeah.
They're
okay to say you plead the fifth. It's okay.
No, I mean, I do have a little bit to say about that. First of all, those are somewhat regulated. And so you want to make sure you are getting involved with an entity that is registered. So they have to register with the Montana Securities Department. And you want to make sure, yes, they are registered, and yes, their structure is such that it's allowable under Montana law. Because a lot of times multi-level marketing companies are not, and they're complicated. The payment structure is complicated, and you just want to make sure you're getting what you deserve, and the people that you bring in under you aren't going to also come back to you and feel cheated when they're not getting what they think they signed up for. So that's the first thing I have to say about that. And I guess that's kind of the back to the read the contract, understand what you're getting into, and just check with the securities department that it is registered and it is allowed, because you also can get yourself in trouble if you are out there recruiting people to be in a multi-level marketing program that is not licensed.
Great. Thank you for sharing that for us. Yeah, the really big thing is just make sure they are a legal entity and in good standing. Yeah, yep. And we often don't think about that. You sign up with your friend and you don't realize there's a whole big thing above that. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. You guys, we would love for you to pop on, ask a question, tell us something that you heard and you're wondering if that's true. Talk to us about a contract. You're like, oh man, I don't know if I should have signed that. You guys, this is your call, your spot for information. So who wants to jump on and ask a question? And it's okay to be shy, but everybody's kind here. We do have one question in the chat. Jill, if you could maybe look at that. But who else has a question if you want to jump on here and ask about setting up your business legally and correctly? Robin, please talk to us.
I want to say a couple things really quick. I, for the first time in December, went into TLC Lingerie. That was the first time I'd been in the store. And I walked in the door and I was like, oh, I mean, it's the most beautiful place. The lights, the colors, the design of the whole place is, I mean, you just feel like you've stepped into this gorgeous, you know, Fifth Avenue boutique. It is the most beautiful store. You guys have done an awesome job decorating that, making people feel welcome. I was just whisked right away to all this beautiful French lingerie and swimsuits. You would not even imagine the amount of swimsuits there are all year round. So I just want to throw that out there and say that it's an awesome store. I'm glad you guys kept it going. And then like how amazing the universe is, because last week, I have the opportunity to get a couple of more schools for the photography business, and we're talking a couple thousand students. And so I visited with another photographer to form a partnership. And now here today, the talk is about business partnerships. So how amazing is God and the universe to say, bring me exactly what I need on the very day that I need it. Today is the day on my list to find an attorney, contact my insurance agent, and set up a partnership agreement. And here, this is what we're talking about. So thank you to Jill and the other lady, I missed your name, I'm sorry, for coming on and talking about partnerships. I need you. I need one of you. So I'll probably be reaching out to you later.
Great.
So could you guys address that? When we are looking for a lawyer to help us with our business, you know, the first thing you look for a lawyer, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of lawyers out there and a lot of types. What should we look for? Where do you start?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, a good lawyer should be able to tell you their limitations, and we would want to send you, if formation isn't our specialty, we want to get you to the person that does that. So you don't go to somebody who says, I can do everything for you, because it is Montana. We do a variety of things. We aren't able to specialize as much as lawyers in some bigger places, but the person who says they do criminal defense and family law and entity formation and litigation, that may not be your best bet. So be leery of that. And there are rating services. So you want to look and see, is this person AV rated is something that is a thing. It's peer review. So there are some kind of peer review things that you can look at and see how much experience that person has. But really, most people find their lawyer through word of mouth, connection with a friend, and then they try to get you to somebody. And then hopefully whoever you get in touch with says, I can either do that or let me get you to the right person.
Yeah. Excellent. And I think that your point there's lots of places where you can check, and you should research the people that you're hiring. You also, you guys, should trust your gut. If you sit down with an accountant and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good, step out. These relationships that you form are going to be deep, and I'd say invasive, but they almost are. They know everything about your business. That's where these go. And you want somebody you can comfortably talk to and also trust to do the very best thing with that information. So getting to know people in settings like this, like Robin, you're doing a great interview with Jill and Amanda this morning. And so you get to, do that gut instinct check this morning. It is great to do that. Don't just trust that your brother knows a lawyer who knows a lawyer. That's not what you want to do. Do research for yourself.
And hire a woman.
Right. Yeah, I would add to Karen's point, you need someone who wants to understand your business. If they take the time to understand your business and they have the experience, that's two things you really need. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, Amanda. When I first started Campus Creek, I was so excited about it. And I'm like, I am doing everything right with this one. I'm registering everything. I'm copywriting everything. And the lawyer asked me so many questions and thought about what we were doing with that trademark. And I know I complained more than once. Oh my gosh, I'm paying him to think. But then when that came around and I really needed him to have thought about that, I was really glad I paid for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it felt weird up front, but in the end, I was like, oh man, that was a good decision. So you pay your lawyers. Jill, did you have time to look at Tana's question in the chat box?
Yeah, about the work comp. So the question is, I that's one we're talking about, right?
Yes, yeah.
That the example I gave about the person tripping over the dog, it seems like the employer has very little control of the environment that others live in. Not sure how fair that is. Can an employer require or enforce work environments to be free of things like pets? I mean, this is such a new world we live in. And so can you say to somebody, your work area you can't have your pets or your kids? Or no, I don't think so. I think just as a practical matter, that's not going to work. But what you could have are some basic kind of policies that these are the kind of safety things that we ask you to, these are the kind of safety measures we ask you to take. And really at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the work comp carrier's decision about whether or not that's covered. And like I said about that earlier example, you might just want that to be covered, right? Because work comp is there to protect you. And if they don't cover it, then you have an employee who is either looking to sue you outside of the work comp structure, or is really unhappy or unproductive, or something. So let work comp take that and lift that burden off your shoulder, but don't go uncovered.
Don't go uncovered is the big word there. That's so important. Yeah, I have a friend in California who is a little bit of a hoarder. I love her dearly, but 3 times she has tripped over boxes in her office, and 3 times the company has covered that for her, or workman's comp has covered that. Right. And the company did put it in their policy handbook now that your office needs to be neat and clean. So there could be a policy about it, but it is a tough spot, Tana. It's a great question, and one that we're probably not really prepared to ask here, but good policies. I've always encouraged companies to have good workman's comp or work policies for their employees, and to work with your lawyer and your accountant and Employers United. Is that the name of it, Kayla? Why am I skipping on that? I'll figure it out. But we have an employer group here in town who is excellent with employee manuals. So you want to have a good employee manual when you get there.
Oh, are you talking about Associated Employers?
There it is. Yes, Associated Employers. They are fabulous. Okay, thank you. Tana knew that too. So I see here that Kathy, you raised your hand, and yes, it's raised. Kathy, jump off mute and ask your question. What do you want to know?
Not really want to know, but just want to throw in, and you guys started to refer to it in the last series of questions and answers, but in the number of partnership agreements that I've written for different groups, the thing that always gets them, has them stalled out, is the policies. And if you don't have a set of policies, it's really difficult to do any kind of, especially employee stuff. So you want to make sure that whoever you're working with doesn't just do a partnership agreement, but actually does a list of policies and procedures with you, things that people know they can rely on, even policies down to, I see, Tana nodding. It's like even down to, when do you pay the bills? If you pay the bills on the 5th of the month, you don't pay the bills on the 10th. If you expect the invoices to go out by the 20th, they don't go out on the 25th. But if you don't have that stuff listed out in some policies or some employee manuals, then when you try to enforce anything, you're going to be out of luck. And the employee is going to have the employee or your other partner or whomever. I've had a couple that were, I live in Butte, so there are people with ranches and family partnerships, and it's only family who can inherit. That means that if you get married, your spouse doesn't inherit, but your kids can. So what happens if there are no kids? Like all of those are kinds of things that I think when people form, especially family partnerships, but any kind of a partnership, you don't think about that stuff. You don't think you're gonna get into a dispute over whether or not that really is what you want to do. And you have to think about all of those, I call it the Garrison Keillor worst case scenarios, like I would hate it if that happened, but it happens. So I think it's really important to make sure that whoever you work with is also working with you on policies and procedures and on employee manuals.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, such great information, you guys. This is why we're doing these. Thank you for that ad, Kathy. So Claire, I'm going to ask you to pop off and ask your question. And Julie asked a question that Lorene is going to be able to answer here in just a minute, or give us some insights too. So Claire, it's your turn to talk.
Hi. So actually, I think my question is a little bit related to Julie. So Julie's question, I've created an LLC, and I think that the information you guys are giving is fantastic, but mine is kind of like I'm the only employee, right? I'm the only employee I ever plan on having. It's created for my protection. And so the information you guys are giving is fantastic. And I'm just kind of getting more and more overwhelmed with all of these layers of, policies and procedures and all this sort of stuff that when I worked with an attorney, she did ask lots of questions, but we didn't really go into this. And it was kind of like, well, if this comes up later, we can deal with it. And so I guess my question is, at what level do all these things need to be sort of very specifically laid out? And then going forward, when do you know to check back in with your attorney to say maybe these things have been tweaked and maybe they do need to be readdressed or not? Because to Julie's point, it would be overkill almost for me to pay for all these things up front, right, and not really have them be relevant, if that all makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. And we're going to talk more about that. But Jill, it looks like you had something to add there. Do you have thoughts?
I was just going to say, I think it's a really good point. And if in fact you are the only employee, you don't have any employees, you're the only person working there, then yeah, that other stuff can wait. You just want to know that if you bring in a partner or if you do start hiring, that's when you have to go check back in. But if it's just you, you don't necessarily need employee policies for yourself. So let that one go.
Right. But what you would want to say, Jill, is that if she's signing contracts for a product that she's producing, then you want to make sure your lawyer is involved in that. Would that be correct?
Right. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And there are things, you guys, that in the beginning you're like, oh, I can't know all that. It's because you don't have to. You have to know enough. And there are people who are going to help you know enough to get started. And then you're going to learn more as you go along. You just do want to make sure you're protected before you lose money or you get sued. Lorene, talk to us a little bit about how people can pay for this and what startup funding looks like. And give us some of the insights from SBDC, please.
Okay. I had a business of my own for 16 years, ran it as a sole proprietor, which probably wasn't the best. I didn't talk to an SBDC advisor at that time, and I had employees. So our services from the SBDC are free, so people can come in and talk with us. We can walk you through the startup steps of registering your business and talk about all these things, and each one we need to do this one-on-one because it's always individualized. Everybody is different. But we do have some great mentors that we can provide for you for free. And so we can give you a half hour of time with an accountant to figure out, how should I set up my business? What's best for my company? Should it be a LLC? Should it be a S Corp? Should it be a sole? Am I okay to run it as a sole proprietor because I don't have any employees for a while, and then I might have to change later? We can set you up with, to talk with a lawyer, to give you some free time to talk with a lawyer to ask some of those questions. And we just say, let's write them all down so that you can get all this, some of these questions answered. And yes, you're going to have to, if you're running a business, you are going to have to pay for some of these services later, but we'll try to get you started as easily and as cheap as possible, because we do have some good mentors that can help you along the way to get you started. We have lots of free trainings, just like this one, where you're getting some really good input, and you can answer these. You've got a couple lawyers on here right now. Put your questions in the chat box and maybe you'll get some good information back from them. Any other things that I should cover, Karen?
No, I think that's great. Although, talk to us just a little bit. When somebody comes to you and says, I want to start this business and I have people who will help me, do you want them to have a fully formed idea, or will you help them to form the plan? And then I'm going to ask a second question to that. What if they're already running? What if they've been running for 5 years? And they're like, I think I could do this better. Can they come see you then? When can somebody come to the SBDC?
You know what? We serve businesses from startup to expansion to selling, whatever there's no limitation. You can be a business that's been in business 10 years. And maybe all of a sudden you have a little glitch and you're saying, I just need some advice. We've got several different advisors that work with different aspects of business. Kevin works with us, and he started his own company and he patented a product, and he did some, he had to have it manufactured. So he's got expertise in that area. Kayla has worked with a restaurant, and so she's got expertise in that area. I've worked with a retail company, so I have some thoughts and expertise in that area. And I just say, come talk to us before you do it. I remember a client coming to me, her and her cousin came and they said, we want to start a partnership. And the one gal had the money because her husband had died and she had life insurance. And I said, how are you going to do this partnership if one person's putting in all the money, and maybe it should just be a business with an employee? And they were like, no, we want it to be a partnership. And a year and a half later, the one gal came back that didn't have any money anymore, and her cousin had stole from her, and she was liable for everything because it was a partnership. And it was like, we can only give you as good of advice as we can, but it's up to you to take that so that you don't get into trouble, because we really do care about you. We don't want we want your money to be secure, and we want your business to be secure and set up in the best way. And so we do refer people to accountants and lawyers all the time, because we are not accountants and we are not lawyers, and we don't want to give bad advice. Lawyers have gone and have a lot of training and they know the best answers. So we send them to lawyers and accountants all the time.
Excellent. Thank you for telling us that. There's a couple great questions in the chat box. I'm going to tell you guys a little story. I put this in my notes getting ready for this. One of the reasons that this is so important to talk about is that the fine print matters. We have gotten so used to clicking, yes, I agree, to fine print contracts on the internet that we forget that when we sign our name or when we click I agree, we have agreed to something. One of the first times that this really hit me in the face and I was so shocked by what had happened was when I was selling cars in Alaska, which is a fun part of my story. But there was a woman who came in and she bought a nice brand new car, and she was so upside down, as that's when she owed more money than the car was worth. And we could not figure out how she had gotten that upside down. And she brought her contract in, and there was this line that said $2,700 and had some kind of a funny little term. And I said, tell me what this means. And she said, oh, that's the tax I had to pay because I was a woman buying a car alone in the state of Alaska. Oh my gosh. And she had paid it, you guys, because she didn't ask questions. People will do this to you, not just because you're a woman, but they do this to people all the time. So this is why we need Jill's and Amanda in our life, and we need to pay attention to the fine points. So if you feel gitchy in your stomach, don't sign and get some help. Just take some look at that, or take a second look at it. So we
One
have
of the things,
just,
Karen, if
oh.
I could pop in here, one of the other things that I would also warn people about is when you take agreements and contracts off the internet, because I know we mentioned it, the big thing to worry about is that every state has a little bit different way that they lay things out. And so you can get yourself in a real pickle. And we've seen it before where clients come in, they're like, look at this contract, and in it, it says in the state of California, and it lists all these different things, but that wasn't a contract for Montana, and that's what they had to bring us. So that's just something that I would just urge people is just, you know, if you need an agreement or you need a contract, just consult with a lawyer, because, you know, you could end up in a whole different sort of issue than if you would have just talked to them in the first place.
that is absolutely right. That is so true. And I saw both Jill and Amanda like, yes, yes, yes. So I am going to tell you that I called the Attorney General in Alaska on the dealership that did that to that lady. Jill and Amanda, anything you want to talk to us about here as we get ready to close this call?
Nothing else from me. Nice to meet everybody.
Amanda, any thoughts from you?
I think we've exhausted this. There's a lot that can go right in starting a business and running a business, and there's a lot that can go wrong. So have people who know what they're doing. And yeah.
That's so beautiful. There's a lot that can go right and there's a lot that can go wrong, and we want it to go right for you guys. Tana, I know you had more things to say and we kind of, you know, got away from that, but tell us what you want these women to know as they start their businesses.
Surround yourself with people you trust.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Don't hire family. If you can avoid that, it just saves in a lot of areas. And I was going to touch on something that Jill and Amanda both brought up. When you do go to an attorney, what I found helpful with what we did was Lisa and I both wrote separately what our goals and what we saw our business. Then we met together, went over it, kind of got all of our ideas of what's important to us to have in place. And then we met with the attorney after we did that. So we kind of had things listed out so that the attorney would kind of know our direction and our common goals, and anything that we were kind of a little bit, I was on one side, she was on another, had the attorney help us kind of see what would be in the best interest of the business. So I think just really staying firm on your policies and also putting procedures in place. Don't make your policies based on one person or two people, a minority of it. Put your policies in place based on what you see as what is your overall objective. Because your policies will come under fire when you enforce them.
Fabulous. That is fantastic. Jill, thank you for that superior answer that you just put in the chat box. Everybody take a moment and look at that chat. Kayla, wrap us up on this call. As you get ready to do that, I'm going to tell everybody that next week we're talking about pricing yourself, pricing your products. And the big thing to know is that you have to pay for a lawyer and accountant, you have to pay for insurance. So you got to make your prices fit that. And we're going to talk about that next week. Kayla, wrap us up a little bit here.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. A big thanks to Tana for sharing her story, and Amanda and Jill for jumping on and just joining us and helping women answer some of the questions that are kind of bouncing around in our heads. And a huge thank you to Karen. As always, she does such a wonderful job facilitating this. And, you know, we do have the next session occurring next week, and that will be on Wednesday, and it'll go at 9:30. And just the same time as today, and we'll be talking about, yes, pricing yourself. So it'll be a really great fun workshop, and so we just hope you'll join us.
Just going to say, yeah, when people come in, some people have all of their ideas and some people don't have, you know, they just have a scattering of ideas. We try to help them focus And so don't think that you have to come in with everything well planned. We do have business plan templates. We help work with cash flow projections. We help with marketing. We want to help you succeed. And so you don't have to come and say, I don't know it all, because none of us know it all. We have great resources. We don't know it all. We just have great resources, and we just want to help you succeed.
Excellent. That is beautiful. Okay, you guys, go out, be successful, and help one another to be successful. I'm so glad that you were on this call today. Everybody have a wonderful day and
Thank you.
charge forward. Bye, you guys.
Take care.